One of the biggest scam fraud holes we've uncovered, which is really crazy, is that the government can give money to a so-called non-profit with very few controls.
One of the biggest scam footholds we've uncovered, which is really crazy, is that the government can give money to a so-called non-profit with very few controls, and there's no auditing, subsequently, of that non-profit. So this is with the $1.9 billion Stacey Abrams, who then give themselves extremely lavish, like insane salaries, expense everything to the non-profit, buy jets and homes and all sorts of things, and live like kings and queens on the tax paradigm. Correct. You mentioned. And this is happening at scale. It's not just one or two. We're seeing this everywhere. All right, folks, hold on to your seats because what we're about to dive into is truly jaw-dropping. Imagine this: non-governmental organizations, or NGOs, meant to serve the greater good, happily gobbling up piles of taxpayer money.
And then there's no auditing subsequently of that nonprofit. So there's no. So this is with the 1.9 billion to Stacey Abrams, they then give themselves extremely lavish, like insane salaries,
and turning it into lavish lifestyles for themselves. My question is about USAID. Has the DOJ team found any evidence that any of the radical left Democrats, like Maxine Waters, Adam Schiff, Chuck Schumer, have received money directly from USAID? And if so, will we be hearing about that evidence anytime soon? Yeah, so there is a massive amount of corruption, but it is circuitous. So what happens is there's money that, obviously it's your taxpayer money, that is then sent to various government organizations who then send it to NGOs, which an NGO is a non-governmental organization, but obviously if it's a government-funded non-governmental organization, it's just an organization. It's just the government. And effectively, there's a giant fraud loophole, which is that the government can send money to an NGO that is then no longer governed by the laws of the United States. So they'll send the money overseas to one NGO, then they'll go through a bunch of them. And then I'm highly confident that a bunch of that money then comes back to the United States and lands in the pockets of the people you just mentioned. I mean, we're talking private jets, luxury homes, and shockingly high salaries, all supposedly funded by taxpayer dollars. Every sneaky maneuver and every fraudulent dime caught Elon Musk's eye, shifting his interest into this scandal. But it is overwhelmingly to Democrats, and they give these billions of dollars to NGOs run by Democrats that then go through a whole network of additional NGOs. It's a giant money laundering scheme. Really, at this point, I think the word NGO and money laundering are almost synonymous. Now, you've got to wonder who's really lining their pockets. Good to see you. I'm not going to beg for you to come on my show. I know it'll happen eventually. You said the other day you uncovered some evidence that there was massive Social Security fraud and that arrests were imminent. What can you tell us about that? And what can you tell us about what you've seen politicians do to make massive amounts of money off of the federal government, like Nancy Pelosi? Please. Yes. So we've encountered there's really so much for it. It's deciding what should be prosecuted first, because it's such a long list. You have to actually prioritize lists. We conveyed the list to the Department of Justice, but the DOJ has a process that they go through to review and think about it. The wheels of justice turn slowly. In fact, obviously I have a maniacal sense of urgency. So to me, when I see that terrible fraud has happened, I'm like, why haven't we arrested someone already? As the saying goes, the wheels of justice turn slowly but surely. And I think probably the person that stole 400,000 Social Security numbers, at least, maybe more, will be arrested hopefully this week. And with respect to the non-governmental organizations, these sort of fake NGOs, I think there needs to be a number of arrests in that regard as well. Because these are fake charities where mostly Democrats, and I want to be clear, there's sometimes a little bit of Republican in there, because they sometimes throw the Republicans
it is circuitous.
a bone to say, hey, be quiet about this. That's where you start getting the uni-party thing going on. Wait a sec. If you enjoy content that challenges the norm and keeps it real, hit that subscribe button. Go on, I'll wait. Done. Welcome aboard. Now let's jump back in. Guys, this rabbit hole goes even deeper than we first thought. We're diving straight into the heart of a system that has allowed unimaginable levels of corruption to fester right under our noses. So, Elon Musk didn't just stumble upon this overnight. It's been a slow and methodical unpeeling of layers that reveal just how insidious these frauds have become. All right, where do I even begin? So let's break this down. The government hands out funding, right? But once the money lands in the hands of these so-called nonprofits, it's like they hit the jackpot. There seemed to be laughable oversight and, critically, a disturbing lack of accountability. As it turns out, many of these organizations treat public money as if it's play money. Get this, because this part is really wild. Instead of that money going where it's needed the most, it's allegedly being used to pay off lavish political favors and to boost personal wealth. We're not talking about small numbers either. Millions of dollars are just siphoned off to maintain luxurious lifestyles for these executives, who are really only interested in themselves. Musk points out something we all might have missed. Take, for instance, how these nonprofits are funneling the taxpayer money through a daisy chain of NGOs, serving as pit stops for cash to just quietly disappear. Each NGO involved takes a little slice of the pie, and piece by piece, the pie simply vanishes. Now here's where things get really murky, and trust me, outrageous. From schlepping funds to buying properties, these NGOs seem to operate like some smoke and mirrors show, a classic misdirection. They're out there buying up homes and ramps up plots of real estate, as if they're making some covert monopoly move with taxpayer dollars. We move on to a particularly eye-popping detail Musk digs into: Social Security fraud, plain and simple. Can you imagine stealing Social Security numbers? 400,000 of them, no less? That's not just audacious, it's outright madness. And the scale of this operation is massive. Moreover, we know the wheels of justice aren't fast to turn, but when they do start, as Musk predicts, we might see some guilty faces have their day in court. The conversation only gets spicier now. We have to ask, could this be done without the complicity of some of our trusted politicians? The spotlight is particularly intense on several Democrats, and Elon, of course, doesn't shy away from pointing fingers. Behind the facade of political righteousness, individuals are allegedly amassing wealth beyond belief. Imagine owning properties worth a fortune on a salary that meets basic expectations. Yeah, what's been happening here raises entirely fair questions about how these riches were actually gained. At the core of Musk's revelation is perhaps the most astonishing detail. There seems to be these elaborate loops of cash flow, kind of like money laundering schemes. Funds circle around a network of both fake and real nonprofits, until they somehow land back in U.S. pockets, often those, Musk suggests, of some particularly wealthy political figures. It's almost too cunning for words, too clever in finding ways around laws. To be fair, yes, it seems that Republicans aren't exactly free of suspicion either. It gains that uniparty semblance, folks from both aisles possibly indulging for mutual benefit, only occasionally contesting to not arise suspicion. Imagine it as a do-not-touch pact hovering across party lines. So let's be real here, the numbers don't lie. When politicians' wallets get fatter while supposed nonprofits grow assets and opulence, we've got to ask the age-old question. Where did all that money really come from? This isn't a mere peek into corruption. It's pouring fuel on a political fire that's calling attention to critical oversight we should all be demanding. The question now is, what's next? How do we tackle what's been happening behind closed doors? More crucially, who's going to have the guts to truly hold them accountable? I'm not the only one eagerly waiting for the day when justice swings back into the spotlight. And maybe, just maybe, this is momentous enough in its ramifications to initiate real change. As we unravel more of this story, the goal is transparency, where taxpayer funds truly help citizens instead of lining dubious pockets. With all that's been uncovered here today, I'm keen to hear your thoughts. Which part of this web of deceit and corruption shocked you the most, and why? Leave your comments below. Until next time, let's keep digging for the truth.